Welcome, everyone, to the first I4CP Next Practices Weekly event of the new year of 2024. Great to have all of you with us today. I know some folks are still streaming in, maybe rolling off their previous meetings or calls. By all means, introduce yourself over in the chat. Leave that chat open. We'll be using that throughout the session today to gather your questions and comments from our special guest. This is the Next Practices Weekly session from I4CP. If you're not familiar with us, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm that discovers the people practices that truly drive high performance. We do this through several mechanisms, primarily through our research studies, through both survey-based, quantitative, as well as qualitative research. We like to tease out what high-performance companies are doing more often than their low-performing brethren in their human capital practices. We look at revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction to define that high-performing organizational cohort. And then we compare what they're doing with low-performing companies and provide that out to our member companies in research reports, infographics, case studies, and lots more. We are a member-based organization. You see here just a small slice of our member logos. If you're with one of these member companies, special welcome to you on the event today. You see our member community spans very large organizations like Amazon, Microsoft, 3M, Ford, and others, as well as smaller companies. We've got a growing cohort of unicorn startups. They also span across all market industry verticals from healthcare and banking, retail, manufacturing, you name it. If you'd like more information about what I4CP membership entails, just reach out to myself or anyone else at I4CP, and we'd be happy to provide that information. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and I have the pleasure of co-hosting most of these Next Practices Weekly events from week to week. This week, I'm joined by my colleague, Carrie Bevis, our Managing Director of Communities and Partnerships. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year to you as well. It's great to have you with us. You're going to be leading the conversation with our special guest, who we'll get to in just a moment, but a few other preliminaries. Wanted to note again, this is Next Practices Weekly. We've got several calls lined up for you. You see some of the guests there on the right that we'll have coming up who have worked at United Airlines, ServiceNow, Pax8. And I learned before the call, I think we're lined up with outstanding guests all the way through the end of March. So we're already off to a great start scheduling these weekly calls. A few other things that I wanted to draw your attention to. Of course, January is the time where people make new goals for the year, set their priorities, and we're no different. Every year we ask all of our executive level boards at I4CP in the fall timeframe, what are your priorities for your HR functional area? What are your predictions for the new year? And we aggregate all of that together in what is, generally speaking, our hottest downloaded report of the year. We call it our Priorities and Predictions Report, C-Suite Perspectives from I4CP's boards. You see that shown here on the screen. This is available to the public, so everyone on this call can download this report. Zeta, thank you for giving the link to that over in the chat. If you haven't downloaded it yet, it's just chock full with both priorities and the predictions of all of these HR leaders. We'll also be walking through some of the key highlights from that report in a coming up public webinar on January 30th. That'll be from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock Eastern Time, 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific Time. And that'll feature Kevin Martin, our Chief Research Officer, as well as Lori Likens, our Vice President of Research. So register for that event. That is separate from the Next Practices Weekly. So if you've registered for this series, that doesn't automatically entail that you have this public webinar on your schedule. You'll need to register for that separately, but I'd highly encourage you to do so. And then lastly, as I said, we're a survey research-based organization, and we've got one major study survey out in the field right now. It's on optimizing team performance. We found that over the years, many organizations are expanding how they measure performance beyond just individuals and leaders, and really looking at more often now holistic teams, from departmental teams to project teams and so on. So this is a pretty thorough study. that my colleagues Rob Cross and Catherine Brecken have taken the lead on. This is currently open and available for you to participate in. We'd love everyone on the call today to please represent your organizations and be part of this research. And again, thank you, Zeta, for putting the link to that over in the chat. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Carrie, who's going to introduce our special guest today and lead the conversation.
Thanks so much, Tom, and welcome, Erin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Tom.
Well, we're going to get right into learning more about you. So, of course, you are the CHRO at Prime Therapeutics, and you've been in the HR space now for over 20 years and have been the CHRO at Prime Therapeutics for the past 10 years. Could you share a little bit about your career journey and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. Well, hi, everybody. Great to see so many people on this first call of the year. And I was just noticing and seeing where everyone is connecting in from. And it looks like we have people all over the country. So I'm envious of anyone who's in a warm, sunny climate and kindred spirits with anyone who's not. I'm in Minnesota, so a little bit chilly, a little bit of snow on the ground right now. So, well, thanks, Carrie. Talking a little bit about my kind of HR journey, it maybe wasn't completely typical. When I was in college, I wasn't planning on going into HR. I didn't even really know that much about the HR field. I kind of stumbled into it. I actually had an internship going into my senior year of college with Target, great organization. It was a management internship in the stores, which is just a great opportunity. And in Minnesota, there's a lot of different Target stores. And at the time, 25 years ago, they were opening up a new store in, I believe it was Fergus Falls. I can't even remember now, but I had the opportunity to go to that store and help them hire and staff. And so it was my first opportunity getting exposure to kind of a mass hiring event and interviewing. And I really enjoyed being part of welcoming and attracting people to a new organization. And then, of course, all the pieces of onboarding people and ensuring that they had a great experience at the company just really fascinated me. And so that's what really intrigued me to move into human resources. I was too far along in my college journey to really, I wasn't interested in changing my major or anything like that. So I just decided to kind of work my way into human resources. I started out in a position out of school at the Art Institutes International, Minnesota as a recruiter. And I had an art background from school. I was a comms major and an art minor. And so that it was just kind of a good combination. And so I got to, kind of get exposed to recruiting, a little bit different than recruiting employees, recruiting students to a college, but still a good experience. It was a really kind of booming job market at the time. It was that, kind of internet tech bubble, and a lot of companies were hiring. And so I decided to take a chance and move from, full-time employment, direct employment, to a contract recruiter role for a company called ADC Telecommunications. That was the name of the company at the time. And I spent 4 months recruiting employees into their business on the manufacturing side. And after 4 months, they hired me as an HR generalist. And I was just so excited. That was, my dream job. And just getting to that point as an HR generalist within, a year and a half of graduating from college was really, really exciting. And that was my goal. I spent a year there at ADC and experienced like the full life cycle. We were hiring. And then it was like a switch flipped and we were laying off. And so in 1 year, I kind of saw the whole life cycle, employment life cycle. And then I was laid off myself. I moved on from there to a company called MoneyGram International, which at the time was headquartered in Minnesota. I believe they're headquartered now in Dallas. I spent 7 years there, and I feel like I just grew up there, kind of learning all of the ins and outs of human resources and the business, and being an HR business partner. I was recruiting as well. And then, it was 2008, and you know, the housing crisis came up. MoneyGram was heavily invested in mortgage-backed securities, so they had some challenges. It was a good time for me to make a move. I made a move to a company called iMation, which was a spin-off company from 3M. And the company was a number of different companies that were spun off from 3M into one company called iMation. They had a lot of cash and were interested in doing a lot of merger and acquisition type work, which was really exciting for me to get exposed to. So that was my main reason for going to that company. I spent 5 years there. It was an international company, so I got exposure to HR, you know, across the globe, and primarily in Latin America, a little in Europe, Canada as well. Really, it was just really a wonderful experience. Got some experience leading teams and big projects and initiatives. And then that company was kind of, you know, on a downward spiral as well. It was the right timing to make a move to a growing company. Otherwise, I would have kind of been pigeonholed into more of a turnaround type company. And I wanted to kind of expand as well. So I made the move to Prime Therapeutics. And I've been at Prime for the last 10 years. And as you said earlier, and it's been just an absolutely wonderful company to be a part of. I feel like, you know, over the course of 10 years, it feels like it's almost been 4 different companies. We've had a lot of different phases and transformations as an organization, but just like I said, an absolutely wonderful company. And it's been a wonderful 10 years. I started out as a senior director and quickly was identified as a successor to the CHRO role. And so for the last 8 years have been in that CHRO role.
I can tell how proud you are of your own career journey, and you should be. It's, I think, inspiring for so many, for myself, I'm sure for many of us on the call that are curious, how does one get into a CHRO position, to see how you got there, and that you weren't scared away from being laid off or having to lay off others, and are really there for the whole experience.
It's all kind of part of the journey, and I wouldn't be here if I hadn't been laid off earlier, because all of the companies I've been at were fantastic. So I probably would have stayed longer. So, you know, it's all, you just kind of take where the journey leads you at times.
Yes, life as your muse. That's one of my going to be mottos for the year.
I love that.
Well, tell us a little bit more about Prime Therapeutics, and maybe what phase you feel the company is in now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Prime Therapeutics is a pharmacy benefit management company. And so to explain that, you know, a little bit, you have your medical benefit, and then you also have a pharmacy benefit. And as a pharmacy benefit manager, we work with health plans as clients and end user members to, you know, help facilitate their pharmacy experience. And so we do everything from negotiate with pharma on pricing and rebates, and we negotiate with pharmacies, retail pharmacies, to create networks and access for people to get those medicines that they need. And then we work to put together the right formularies with, you know, the right drugs and accessibility and things like that for our clients and members. And then, of course, when it's time to fill a prescription, we help adjudicate those claims or process those claims for people, you know, against their benefit. And we do this at health plans. We support state governments on the Medicaid side. We cover a really wide spectrum of pharmacy management services and really pride ourselves on extremely strong customer service and customer experience.
Well, I know you mentioned that the company has changed a lot, and we know that you've also experienced a lot of M&A activity, maybe which has propelled your focus on the employee experience, which is the focus of today's conversation with you.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the context and the challenges that you faced with a particular merger at Prime, with Prime Therapeutics and Magellan RX Management?
Absolutely. So it's just kind of giving a little bit of a foundation, you know, the background, a little bit of the background of Prime, some of the phases that we've gone through is, you know, earlier on in my tenure at Prime was kind of a smaller niche player in the PBM space. We had, some really strong aspects of our company, but we needed to get more competitive in different ways as well. And so we kind of went through a transformation to become more competitive with our pricing and supply chain and other things. And that anybody, on the call who, you get involved with a business from all the different nuts and bolts, reinventing your supply chain, getting costs in check, that kind of thing can be a very big transformation and overhaul for a company. So we went through periods of time where we were doing that, but we did it very successfully and quickly found ourselves in a position where, we had business strength and we were in a position to do an acquisition. Magellan RX was a company that we had really looked at very highly over the years and tried to emulate some of the things they were doing as a business. Magellan RX was very innovative, doing things specifically in the specialty drug management space that again, we tried to do ourselves. The opportunity came up to pursue acquisition of Magellan RX, and we were finally, it found ourselves, like, the timing matched up. We found ourselves in a good position to be able to do something like that. So the stars aligned, and we were able to come together as two companies. It was a challenging acquisition, exciting first and foremost. I mean, first and foremost, it was absolutely exciting for both organizations. Magellan RX was excited to be acquired by a company that was in their space, understood their business, and could really help them continue to grow. And of course, we were really excited to acquire a business that was so innovative and doing wonderful things in our space. We were also really excited because it was a big talent play for us as well. Magellan RX had a really deep talent. We all know that talent is hard to find, or you need to, train people, and that can be time consuming. And sometimes we don't have time. And so there were so many positive things about the coming together of these two companies, but it was challenging because Magellan RX was just a slightly smaller company than Prime Therapeutics in terms of employees. And so this was a big acquisition for our company, and we needed to do it really thoughtfully. People were so excited about it on both sides. We needed to figure out how to go about this acquisition in a way that could take that positive energy and not squash it, but let it breathe and grow and continue into, this combined growth organization that we want.
So I think somewhere in these slides, you had a really interesting concept of moving from HR to HX. Ooh, yes. And maybe this is the perfect visual of what that means.
Yeah, totally. I think it's the next slide, but as I was saying here, we were saying to ourselves, how do we capture and build on the essence and the excitement around this acquisition? So as we move to the next slide, it kind of highlights, or at least it grounds us foundationally in kind of a macro view of what people want in an employer, what people are looking for. And so we had to kind of start there. And this gets at the employee experience. So if you think about it, 20 plus years ago, and an emphasis on plus, because this can go back 30, 40, 50 plus years. But even 20 years ago, things were different. Employees were focused on working for a company. That was kind of the mindset. And so, yes, you had things like onboarding and performance management and promotion, but things like service anniversaries were a really big deal and milestone. People stayed at companies for longer periods of time. They wanted to get to that 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year mark. Those were big milestones. People spent more time at companies because they were more connected for different reasons. One might have been proximity. Back in the day, people were like, hey, I want to work for a company that's in my town, or, have a manageable drive. Today, we're much more virtual. So that's not always the connection for people, that proximity standpoint. But also pensions were really strong 20, 30 plus years ago. And so people had a hook to stay at companies longer. So again, the theme was more about working for a company. That has completely evolved over the years, and we've all felt it, just in the last several years. It's been evolving over time, but then of course the pandemic sped that up so quickly in so many ways. We felt kind of like micro feelings of this, every 6 months or something, there'd be a change, a little bit of a change or drift in this evolution that we felt very pointedly. So you can see in this visual today, it's more of a partnership. Employees don't feel themselves as I'm working for you, this company, Prime Therapeutics. They're thinking about the fact that it's a partnership. I'm helping you, Prime, and Prime is helping me. And there's so many other things that people are looking for in an employer. They want to understand the purpose and vision of a company, and they want to feel connected to it. They want to understand benefits and compensation and make sure that it's competitive with the market. And people have access to market data. We're much more, transparent type society where there's, information at your fingertips all over the place. And so companies need to be more transparent than they've been in the past. People are looking for flexibility. They're looking for, connection, both socially and professionally. And so there's so many other things that as employers we're expected to bring. And it's a competitive marketplace. So if we don't bring these things to bear and create that right partnership, employees know that they have a choice and they can find that somewhere else. So, to be very competitive and attract the right talent, this is a good grounding visual to say, okay, here's what people are looking for. And so here's what we need to consider. And, as we move on, some people might say, well, does this really matter? Yeah, it does. And there's numbers out there to show, I think this is from a recent McKinsey survey, but employees who have a positive experience at work, and positive experience includes, it's not limited to, but it includes all the things around that second wheel that we saw on the previous slide. They're 16 times more engaged and 8 times more likely to stay at an organization. And, when we all were experiencing the great, resignation, or, I think it had a couple of different titles several months ago, we would have just really, this was the holy grail of answers to that. How do we engage people 16 times more and create an environment where they want to stay with 8 times more likelihood to stay connected to an organization? That's what we were looking for. And so I really do believe that this positive employee experience is that answer to creating more longevity and connection for people at their employer.
And such a business imperative too. I think you could probably put one more stat on here with a big dollar sign about how expensive it is when you lose people, have to re-find them, onboard them, and do that over and over again. We've done some interesting business cases here on the talent transition and just how costly it is to an organization if you can't help people stay happy.
Absolutely true. Yes. Yeah, there's several stats you could add to this. I like that. I'll do that.
Let me just jump in and note you're getting some kudos from folks over in the chat. They're really liking this sort of evolutionary change from HR to HX, these two visuals. And one thought I'd just throw in, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, Erin. As you said, 20 plus years ago, most people, not all, but far more people, those were the sort of life cycle of the employee: onboard, track and develop performance, get promoted, service anniversaries, and then retirement and pension. What they care about today, I think, varies from individual to individual. I think everyone probably cares to at least a little extent, sometimes to a great extent, to all of the areas of the wheel there on the right, but it does vary from person to person.
Right.
For some, parental family leave would be a huge driving factor for a particular employer. For others, it's social impact. For others, it's the purpose and vision of the organization, flexibility and wellness. I could name off all of these. And for any one individual, the chart of what they care about the most would vary from the next person in the cubicle or office right next door. So there's a much greater personalization of these values as well.
That's so true. And you bring up a good point, Tom, that you want to understand your organization and, just the different aspects that could stand out. there's a kind of, to a certain starting point, a number of different offerings that you want to have. But for example, Prime has a high concentration of people in that, new parenting age group. And so we know that parental and family leave is something that we have to be focused on all the time. Depending upon your company, you may be in different kind of life cycles as an organization, and your employee base may skew to different things. So it's good to know kind of a macro view of what employers should offer, and then a more specific micro view of what's specific to your particular evolution as an employer.
I'll also just call out, we had a comment from Leela in the chat. She was noting that you sort of combined flexibility and wellness in one of the wedges, but she thought maybe flexibility sort of applies to many of the different wedges here. It's sort of a red thread through several of them. I assume you would agree with that notion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wellness too is kind of a thread throughout all of them. They all kind of interweave and connect to each other.
I'm so glad this slide is up, because I was hoping you could help us make the connection between what we were just looking at and how this supported a collaborative merger with Magellan RX.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we were looking at before was like that macro view, kind of general across an employer of what we wanted to offer, who we wanted to be, what we wanted to recognize. Specific to this merger of Prime and MRX, we knew that we wanted to support a collaborative merger versus an acquisition. An acquisition can have its time and place, but the difference that we see in that is that an acquisition sometimes can feel like, hey, we're acquiring you, now you're going to be us, and here's the way we do things. And so change what you do to the way we do it and become us, and kind of forget your old identity and all of those things and become us. Well, in this scenario, that didn't feel right, because we didn't want them to forget their identity or what they're doing and all of their successes and things like that, because that was the exact reason that we were acquiring MRX. We wanted to learn from them. We wanted to foster all of their goodness and help it grow. And so we had to be very cognizant about not squashing that. And so we took on this terminology, and words matter, of this is a collaborative merger versus an acquisition. And we had to do some kind of change management with people about this, because there were even people on the Prime side and the MRX side that would call it an acquisition, and they had certain expectations of how this would go based on their previous experiences. So we had to kind of rework thinking, and it took a little bit of time to get there. How we did that was, creating some concepts or different things that we could anchor on. So high level, we said there are three main things that we want to do in this collaborative merger. One, that's that we want to create a radically welcoming environment. This term radical welcomeness actually comes from our diversity and inclusion team. And they created it as we were spinning up diversity and inclusion at Prime, and said, hey, if we're going to be radical about anything at Prime, we want to be radical about the way we welcome people to our organization and continue to welcome them throughout their employment at the company. We needed to minimize disruption. We were not spinning up something that was new. We were merging with a company that had clients and responsibilities and customers and a lot of work that literally we had to be able to flip a switch and have them not miss a beat. And so we had to work really hard to minimize disruption. And that's key to people who care about their jobs and their clients and customers. They don't want to have huge disruption to their work. They take too much pride in that. And so we needed to minimize disruption. And of course, we needed to retain talent. This was a big talent play for us, and you'll hear more about that in a moment. But this, your company is only as good as the talent that you have there. The secret sauce to what your company does are the people that make things happen every day. And of course, that was the talent at MRX. And so we were really focused on talent retention.
I did note, I think there's a lot of interest about this kind of idea of radical welcomeness, and Angela in the chat was asking exactly how help people create that cohesive new culture in this post-merger world, without using words like assimilate or acquisition, as you mentioned? What would be some examples of what radical welcomeness looks like, or having both coexist?
Yeah, oh my gosh, that could be a separate presentation all on its own of different ways that we've kind of brought about radical welcomeness at Prime. It starts with how we connect with prospective candidates, employees in our sourcing and recruiting process. Our recruiting team is really focused on being radically welcoming and creating that connection right from the first point of contact. And we bring that to our leaders and other key employees who are part of the interview process that carries on into onboarding. And we have created an onboarding plan that is not just specific to the department that you're working in. They do onboarding as well, but we have an onboarding program that's for everyone, where people get connected very quickly to other people across the organization. They get connected to different teams and work groups and career development channels. And we just have a lot of different kind of plug and play offerings and programs that employees can come a part of that can help them build that connective tissue with our organization immediately and feel like, hey, there's a spot for me here, or multiple spots for me where I feel really connected. We carry that through in our programs like performance management and, merit and incentive and other things. Every interaction, we call them moments that matter. All of these connections, especially the moments that really stick out for people, we're very concentrated on making them a very special moment for people where they feel seen and heard and a part of things. Another item that we do is an engagement survey every 6 months, and it's become part of our culture, something that employees expect. We read all the comments, we follow up on it, we center a lot of our work around the feedback that we get from that engagement survey. So the list goes on, but that's a little snippet of some of the things that we do to focus on radical welcomeness. And I think radical welcomeness in and of itself, that term, paints a picture for people in the organization to say, I'm not just going to welcome this person to the organization. I'm going to welcome them radically, and that paints a little bit of a different picture. And I think people, instead of taking one step, they might take 3. And that's what the type of culture that we want to bring and continue to help thrive at Prime Therapeutics is, let's take the 3 steps. Let's keep going and get to the 5th step and help create the culture that we want.
I know we want to move into the broader employee experience of the sort of combined organization, because you've got some great content to share with us there. But just a couple of other questions that have come up in the chat. Amy's just wondering, from a technology perspective, your HR tech stack, is there 1 or 2 tools in particular that have really helped to enable employee experience and maybe even the M&A process?
Yeah, we use Workday at Prime Therapeutics. So that's been, a key technology for us. And we have a lot of different connection points in Workday. And then, I would say that Workday is probably the biggest. And then also our learning management systems. And we've used different learning management systems at Prime. And so I think, a number of them can work, but really utilizing your learning management system as a strong connection point to a lot of training and programs too is certainly front and center. And then also, I would say the intranet site that we have, SharePoint, other things really connect people to communication and information and data. That was really critical in this as well.
All of that makes sense. And then the other question I wanted to surface for now, others are pouring in, but David was just wondering the onboarding process, getting people, connected very quickly. Do you have an example of anything interesting or innovative that you've done there?
Yeah, so one thing that we do with onboarding is we have like monthly, it's like once you're a new employee at Prime, you become part of this group. And you can be part of the group forever if you want. But you're part of the group that gets invited to monthly calls where we'll have different guest speakers, different leaders throughout the organization, or program managers or things like that, where you can learn about the company, connect with leadership, so that's something that has really helped people connect. And it's like it's a program. We have a program leader who runs it and coordinates it, and kind of like we're doing here. You bring in guest speakers each week or each month. We do the same thing there, and people can continue with that for the life of their employment, or they can kind of plug and play as they wish with that. Another thing we do is we each year we create different emails that go out to people, from myself, from our CEO Mustafa Kamal. We write them personally, and they go out to employees at their anniversaries and other milestones. And then each year we recreate the email and keep it, fresh and new for people. But it's such a nice connection. People appreciate that recognition of their important milestones, and then they'll reach out to us and say, thank you for this email. And then we'll reach back out, and it creates a conversation. One other thing we do that's really important to our culture is that every week our CEO, Mustafa, sends out an email to the company. And a lot of times it's about what's going on in the business or the marketplace. Sometimes it's personal about what's, going on with Mustafa and his family, or his thoughts on this or that. Or other times he'll bring in guests, to write on a specific topic. But it's a nice way to stay connected, not only to our new employees, but to all employees. And it helps you feel connected. People feel like they know Mustafa personally from the things that he shares, and from some of the other guests that he has there. We do town halls each quarter with leaders, and also with all employees. And so the list goes on of the ways that we connect people, but hopefully that paints a picture for people.
Yeah, thank you so much. I definitely want to underscore the focus on connectivity. It sounds like even before the merger, the focus on getting people connected to the right people in the organization to build a network that supports one's personal career journey, but also being able to reach to talent across the organization. And then also, as you're talking about, feeling seen by leadership, feeling recognized. So I think these are all beautiful examples of this people first organization approach, but tell us a little bit more about what each of these things mean to you.
Yeah, so we put these concepts together as we were digging in a little bit further into this particular merger, on how we wanted to create a people first organization. You can have a concept of this just in general as you onboard people, for jobs throughout the year. But when you're onboarding 3,000 people at one time in one day, at the flip of a switch, we wanted to have a even deeper plan. And so we took time to invite feedback on this concept of moments that matter. So what are going to be some of the moments over the course of the next year, over the course of their employment at Prime, that are going to be really meaningful, that if we spend our time and focus there, it will be time well spent. Sometimes you can't just boil the ocean, because if you're trying to do everything, it loses its impact. So we got feedback on different moments that matter from that team. And then from that, we designed experiences around those moments that matter to make sure they were curated and felt the way that we were intended and would drive the right outcomes. And then beyond that, we needed to engage the organization in a human experience culture beyond just HR. Great that HR knows these concepts and is working on this, but HR isn't everything at the company. It's one aspect. So we needed to create that culture. So I'll give you a little bit of an example here of a moment that mattered specific to this acquisition. Remember, we have a company that's active. It has a lot of clients, a lot of responsibility. They couldn't miss a beat. And so the fact that we had to move them from their systems, and we didn't move all systems right away. That was part of the plan as well, but we had to move them to many new systems day one. And so we really worked very closely with IT and legal and other groups to ensure that the technology experience day one was seamless for people. And if they did have any hiccups, they knew exactly who to call. And it was kind of a concierge type helpful service for people. If they had any issues, they didn't need to search and search for answers. We were right there to help them. And you can imagine across IT and HR and all of these different groups that are involved in a first day experience, we really wanted to tie down very tightly something very smooth and easy for those employees. So that's one example of a moment that mattered, that we really worked to kind of the nth degree to make sure it was smooth and seamless for people.
Beautiful. There's a lot of questions in the chat about the kind of combined culture. So maybe we can go to the next slide and learn a little bit more about how you not only were able to speak to all the excitement of this cultural merge, but also address some of the difficulties. And I mean, being able to address those tech questions day one, I think is such a good example of the small but meaningful things that really impact a person's day.
Absolutely. So what this slide represents is an exercise that we went through as a leadership team, and also all of the key leaders who were really helping drive this merger. We brought together and kind of worked through a survey and different conversations to say, you know, what's special about Magellan RX, and what's special about Prime Therapeutics, and what's similar about us, and what's different. And so, you know, around the circle here, you can see different comments, you know, focused on innovation, focused on entrepreneurial spirit, mission driven, all sorts of themes came up. And what we found is that MRX and Prime were really aligned on very core things that matter. We were aligned on doing what's right, you know, ethically, and kind of the core of the way we go about doing our business, doing the right thing, was aligned. Our collaborative spirit and nature was really apparent in both organizations. And our drive to deliver results was similar as well. What was a little bit different in our organizations that actually produced a little bit of friction out of the gate was that MRX, Magellan RX, was really a company that was entrepreneurial, and they were innovative. And that was at the core of who they are. On the Prime side, at the core of who we were, was a company that was efficient and scalable, and you know, really used to supporting large clients and driving, you know, large activity efficiently. And so what seemed like friction at times when people would start working together, like, oh, they just want to do this so it's scalable, and oh, they just want to do this so it's innovative. But we realized we needed to talk about that. And so we came together as an organization. Our leadership team talked about this, and we just grounded people in the fact that this is exactly why this merger makes sense for us. The Prime side needed and wants the innovation and entrepreneurial spirit of MRX, and we need to learn that from them. And the MRX side is entrepreneurial and innovative, but they also need to be able to figure out how to construct that innovation so it's scalable and efficient and can grow. And so we came up with this concept that we together need to be able to innovate for growth. And that's where that scalability and efficiency meets innovation and entrepreneurship. So it was a good conversation to recognize that, yeah, that friction is okay. And but we need to channel the friction into something new that combines the talents of both orgs. It was a really good exercise and grounding experience for us to go through and kind of figure out where we need to focus a little bit more. And from this is more of the raw results of our conversations as a leadership team. But in the next slide, it evolved to, it's one slide over, but I'll stop here for a moment. At the same time that we were redefining our values as an organization, we also together took the opportunity to say, let's redefine our purpose as a company. We just basically merged together, another company of almost similar size. And you can't, that changes your DNA so significantly that it's worth our time to talk about our purpose and redo it. And so we came up with reimagining pharmacy management to provide the same care we would want for our loved ones, which is something that is really, when you go back to that first slide where people want to connect to a purpose and vision of an organization, this is something that you'd have a hard time not feeling a connection to. So this was pivotal for us as well. As we move to the next slide, this just shows how, I'm sorry, maybe I missed it here. Anyway, I think, or maybe we just went one too far. Oh, it might not be in here. I apologize. Anyway, we have another slide that just shows how we took this kind of raw data in the middle of the circle and we turned deliver results, do what's right, work together, which we changed to win together, and innovate for growth into our corporate values and competencies. And then from there, we created for leaders as well, that helps leaders understand that they're the champion for these outcomes in our culture. And so they have a heightened responsibility. So anyway, you can see how we took this brainstorming exercise and turned it into that foundational cultural elements for our company.
Yeah, I absolutely love, and we had questions from Angela, David, I think a couple of others in the chat that were, teeing this up basically. How do you survive a merger acquisition process with at least some of what you remember from the previous company, whether you're with Prime or with the other organization, Magellan? And I particularly love the story you told that led to that fourth one, innovate for growth, because that just in 3 words, really 2 concepts, innovation and growth, combines together in something pithy that everyone can remember. And that combined exactly those 2, paradoxical, seeming contradictory aspects of the 2 former organizations, and just merge them together so beautifully. I think that's wonderful.
Great. Thanks for calling that out, Tom. And I'll just even add, even small things were meaningful to people. So for example, at Prime, our PowerPoint slides were in these different shades of blue and it was all kind of monochromatic. Magellan RX had a much more colorful palette. We changed, you can see in the bottom corner here that we incorporated some of their colors into our imagery. The blues that we use are brighter and more vibrant. And so even subtle things like that, and visuals are meaningful to people. They could feel themselves visually at Prime as well. It wasn't a huge departure for Prime, but it was meaningful enough to say, hey, we're all changing our DNA here enough that we should change these things to really create something that's the best of both worlds.
The other thing I just wanted to note about this company, I mean, we've all worked, probably most everyone on the call, at more than one organization. I've worked at 4 in my career, and purpose and vision statements, the executive team always wants every employee to be able to rattle that off, just have it ingrained in them, memorized, if you will, and have it really mean something to them. And that can be hard if it's full of business jargon or HR talk sometimes. This one, though, because it connects to sort of that classic golden rule of treating people how you want to be treated, I think that nicely gave it a hook that makes it much more memorable for people to sort of remember and live by in the organization.
Right. And it's such a great connection to our radical welcomeness work and employee experience work as well, because if our business is about how we want to care for our clients in the same way we would want for our loved ones, we want the same thing for our employees as well. So it just creates a whole beautiful connection to the whole of the company.
Exactly. And the I4CP employee experience exchange, one of the things that we've talked about is being able to connect the customer experience with the employee experience. And I think that purpose statement does that so beautifully.
Yeah, bingo, spot on. So this slide just shows some of our results from this work. And so you can see I talked earlier about the fact that we do an engagement survey twice a year. We use Glint for our engagement survey. So that's another, technology play that some may be interested in. Our engagement score. So we acquired MRX in December of 22. We took our first engagement survey in February of 23 and our second in August of 23. So we have another one coming up here in just a few weeks. Our engagement score went up, I think 2 points in February and again 2 points in August. And our response rates are always really high. And we consider that to be, kind of a score in and of itself when people are that willing to engage with the survey. Which is amazing. And we've had higher responses at times too into the 90s. And so that's always our goal to get back there. Our retention, specifically around senior leadership, who are the folks who are, guiding people day to day through integration and growth as a business, has been 98%. And we've worked really hard to ensure that, hey, this merger was as much about talent as anything else. And so having high turnover just would not have been acceptable here. And so we're really proud of the fact that we've been able to keep that talent engaged. And then, of course, circling back to how this translates into how the company's performing, our enterprise goals for this year, 2023, are forecasted above target, above 100%. And we couldn't be more excited about that in our first, year as a combined organization. So, I think this all goes to show that employee experience matters, engagement matters, and, you can see it in these metrics.
And we know that there can be a lot of energy at the beginning of a big change, like a merger, even at the beginning of the year, like we're in right now. But as you move forward, how are you thinking about sustaining this momentum?
That's a great question. Yeah, you have to create structures that help sustain these things. It can't just be a one and done, flash in the pan type. People will read right through that. We've all experienced that in life and other scenarios. And so for it really to be meaningful, it has to be part of your culture. To be part of your culture, it has to be something that everybody does. It's everyone's responsibility. And you have, long-standing programs that support that. So this is not an exhaustive list, but you can see under our programs, we have diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a DE&I council made up of employees, and we have got 7 employee resource groups and growing of folks that they're just constantly creating different moments that matter and connective tissue and opportunities for people to get involved. We have a program called Hub and Home, which is our approach to flexible work, where most of our work is done, at home, most of our day-to-day kind of heads down work, but then we come together in these hubs when we're working collaboratively and want to connect in different ways. Career development programming, we have that available virtually. And when we come together in these hub days, and that's something that we concentrate on very specifically at Prime. Career development is something that everyone's interested in some way, shape, or form, and we want to connect with people where they're at in their career journey. And that may mean that they're going to move on from Prime at some point and go to another organization. And we understand that we may not be the end point in a journey, but we may be a stop along the way. But we want that stop that people have to be very memorable, very positive, so they share that with others and create that cycle of people coming to Prime. That's a little bit of a different mentality that maybe not all companies have, but we have that incorporated at Prime. Don't get me wrong, we want to keep talent at the company, but we also want to support people in their journey. And we understand that Prime isn't going to be all things to all people all the time. Wellness, the list goes on programs. We have tools in there as well. And I'll just kind of highlight enterprise communication. I think that is a tool that cannot be underestimated. So when I talk about those weekly emails from our CEOs, the quarterly connections, town halls where all employees are invited, all leaders are invited, all senior leaders, those cadences are really important to connect with people, to share knowledge, to share information, to have fun. You know, it's really important. And that, of course, that starts with strong strategic planning and goal planning, because that feeds into all of that communication. Also having strong change management programming. You can see this whole presentation has been a lesson in change and how to bring people along. And this same kind of components could be applied to other types of changes in organizations. Those can be make or break moments for people when they go through significant change at a company. But if you can manage that change well, and help bring people along and involve them in the right ways, it can be a positive. And then, of course, culturally, there's so many other things here. I won't go through them. I've talked about a lot of them already, but, you know, culturally, you want to create those strong structures as well. Not an exhaustive list by any means, but gives you a little bit of a picture.
I know that we are getting close to the end. I see you looking at me, Tom. But as we take a moment to think about what's next for Prime Therapeutics, I also want to weave in one of the excellent questions from Karen in the chat about if you were to do another acquisition in the future, another collaborative merger in the future, is there something that you would do differently having learned from this experience?
Absolutely. I think, you know, a lot of what we learned through this experience, we kind of learned as we took steps along the way. It wasn't, I didn't have this presentation done, you know, as day one, as we started talking about integration planning, this is how we're going to do it. It was a bit of an evolution. And so we kind of had some learning moments along the way to get to that point. So I would say, first of all, we definitely would use this as a foundational kind of template, and maybe start some of those things a little bit sooner. One thing I would say too is that, you know, we didn't necessarily right out of the gate say this is a collaborative merger versus an acquisition. Some people did, and then some people had other vernacular that they were using, and it took us a little while to get aligned on what our true goal was, collaborative merger versus acquisition. So I would start some of those expectations and concepts and that, you know, grounding us and guiding principles much sooner. But, you know, hey, you live and you learn, and it took us some time. We got to the right point, which is good, but now we have some good lessons learned to take to the next acquisition.
Well, those are some great takeaways as we come to a close here. I want to thank you both. Thank you, Carrie, for leading the conversation. And thank you, Erin, for just sharing so much of this journey of really boosting employee experience at a now combined firm. Two organizations, like you said at the outset, were similar in size, but you've obviously pulled it off, and I think you're on a great path for the future. So thanks again for everything you shared.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really great. Thanks everyone for attending too. And if people have other questions or comments or whatever, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect and chat and help, you know, any more that I can.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. As you see on the screen and also in the chat, these sessions are available for recertification credit hours for both HRCI and SHRM. So just jot down the relevant program ID or activity ID if that's applicable to you. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing everyone again next week. We'll have another great guest. Until then, have a great rest of your week and weekend coming up, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.